Good evening, dear ones. Welcome to our Kirtan and stories. This evening we're going to focus again a little bit on discipleship, the disciple-guru relationship, and we'll touch on Swamiji's relationship with Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda. So let's begin now with a prayer together. You can repeat this out loud or silently in your heart. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, beloved friend God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, all saints and sages of all religions and all time, humbly we bow at thy feet. Divine Mother, we are thy disciples. We are made in thy image. You must free us from all delusion, all ignorance and limitation. Awaken our heart's love this evening as we chant together. Guide us in thy light and with thy light until we become one with that light. Om. Peace. Amen. As we do in virtually every kirtan, we will sing a chant for several minutes, and then there will be a little pause that will come before the next chant. And so take that time, take that pause as an opportunity to experience the deeper octaves, the deeper levels of the chant. The chant begins, in a sense, the chant is sort of like our own awareness of our bodies and our own sort of self-identity. The chant has an outward level, and the outward level is the music. It's the rhythm, it's the melody, in a few cases, it's even the harmony, though usually we don't focus on that in such a small group as just the two of us here. But those are the outward aspects. Even the words themselves that we're chanting are, in a sense, the outward level of the chant, because the meaning of the chant goes deeper than just whatever words can express, because there's an energy, there's a rising energy, and the chant is designed to get in amongst us and awaken that energy and draw it upward towards the divine. And so we can assist that process by taking the outward feeling of the chant as we express it. And I invite you to sing these out loud with us if you can, if you're in an environment that is suitable for that. Just let it come. Let your own body and your own voice be the instrument that Divine Mother is playing as we chant together. But then as the chant gets more inward, try to draw your own energy inward with it. In the same way that when we begin a meditation, we may, we may inhale, tense the body. We may do breathing exercises. We may, adjust our pillows and get our posture just right, and, fiddle around with the outward aspects of dealing with the body. But then once we start going inside, we start practicing techniques, focusing on the breath perhaps, or the flow of energy within. And then ultimately we go even beyond technique, because real meditation is deeper than any particular technique. It's an actual experience, and chanting is designed to give us that same experience. I have sometimes called chanting yoga for the heart, because chanting involves sort of, in a way, sort of tensing and relaxing or stretching the heart. And I don't just mean like cardio exercise. I mean the heart's natural aspiration to be in love with life, to be in love with the divine. And we're stretching that with the chants, and they sort of help us to find different avenues to experience that stretch and to offer ourselves into it. So offer yourself into each one of these chants. And then as we get silent, offer yourself even more deeply into the stillness that the chant will help to create inside of you. And then we'll go on to another chant. And after several chants, we'll have a meditation, and then we'll do a few readings and share a few stories of Swamiji, and but also just life on the path together. So let's begin now with no birth, no death, no caste have I, father, mother have I none. I am he, blessed spirit, I am he. Mind nor intellect nor ego feeling, sky nor earth nor metals am I. I am he, blessed spirit, I am he. And there are two other verses that we'll get to when we come to them. No birth, no death, no caste have I. No death, no caste have I. Father, mother, have I none. Father, mother, have I none. I am he, blessed spirit, I am he, blessed spirit, I am. Mind, intellect, sky nor earth nor metals above, sky nor earth nor metals above. I am he, blessed spirit, I am blessed spirit, I am he. All of fancy is someone, all of fancy is someone. Free from things that earthly life, free from things that earthly life. I am blessed spirit, I am blessed spirit, I am. Bondage I fear not, I feel thy joy. Bondage I fear not, I feel thy joy. Free, oh free, oh free, thy bliss. Free, oh free, thy bliss. I am blessed spirit, I am blessed spirit, I am. No birth, no death, no past, no life. No death, no past, no life. Father, mother, have I none. We'll sing Sri Yogananda, Guide to Inner Freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusion.
Guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Ram, Shri Radhe Govinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Ram, Shri Radhe Govinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Ram, Shri Radhe Govinda. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Rama, Shri Radhe Govinda, Shri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Rama, Shri Radhe Govinda, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Rama, Shri Radhe Govinda, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Hare Krishna Hare Rama, Shri Radhe Govinda, Shri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Shri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions.
I have a short meditation after this next chant. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord, thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. Make me the sea, oh, make me the sea. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. Wave of the seas on the sea. I am the holy sea. I am the holy sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave of the seas on the sea. Wave of the seas on the sea. I am the I am the God of the sea. So down my heart, so down my heart, and I never apply, now and I never apply. The seed is on the sea, wave up the seed is on the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. So down my life, so down. Now and I never apart. Now and I never apart. Wave up the seas on the sea. Wave up the seas on the sea. I am the make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. So now and I never apart. Now and I never apart. Wave up the seed is on the sea. Wave up the seed is on the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the God of the sea. I am the so so let's meditate together. So we'll have a few readings and some stories to go with those. And can you flip that thing around so I can see it? Thank you. That's good. Okay. Won't you? Well, that's all right. Okay. So I'm going to read a story. This is so I'm reading from Swami Kriyananda's book, The New Path, and I'm going to just touch on a number of stories where Swami is talking about the connection that they had with Yogananda and his advice to them as monks and as individuals, and also some of the interactions that Swami Kriyananda himself had with Yogananda personally. Yogananda is speaking here and he's giving advice to the monks. Don't mix with others too closely, he recommended to us one evening. I'm going to just cut in here for a second. You know, we've had, what is it now, 15 months of isolation, and we sometimes start to feel like maybe we could mix together a little bit because we've sort of been all isolated. And, you know, you go out shopping or something and it's like, wow, you know, we can actually move around a little bit. But this is a serious point, and so I'll continue now in a moment here, because there is this instinctive need to be together with other people, but for it to be uplifting, it has to be on a deeper level than is typical in the world. So I'll just repeat this. Yogananda says, don't mix with others too closely. He recommended to us one evening, the desire for outward companionship is a reflection of the soul's inward desire for companionship with God. But the more you seek to satisfy that desire outwardly, the more you will lose touch with the inner divine companion, and the more restless and dissatisfied you will become. He told me a story in connection with this point. When I was young, I met someone who was married. He said to me, I used to have many friends and enjoyed their company. After I got married, however, I seldom saw them again. I then realized that my need for their company had actually been a suppressed need for a mate. Thank you very much, I said to him. You've taught me something important. Frequently, Master held up to us examples of saints who had remained withdrawn even from their fellow devotees. Seclusion, he often told us, is the price of greatness. Though mental withdrawal may not make one popular with less dedicated devotees, it is a shortcut to God. And Swami relates that one of Yogananda's close disciples was emphasized that in her own early life in the monastery, and was dubbed by her fellow monastics for a while as the half-baked saint. And you can sort of see how this kind of thing is a little tricky. I remember an experience that I had in college, and my college career was good. It was adequate. I was a decent student, as I was in high school and in other grades. However, I was energetic and a bit of a free spirit in college. And so consequently, trouble was not entirely unknown to my experience. And I remember as I was dipping my toes into the water of the spiritual path, I started to feel this very interesting, very blissful need to withdraw. I just wanted to be alone. I wanted to be in the joy that I was feeling. And I just didn't really want to be around other people, even though I enjoyed the heck out of being with them. They were wonderful people. We had a lot of fun together. You know, it was a very close knit, very lively dorm scene. It was a co ed group. And we just enjoyed each other's company. And I just pulled back from it. I sat by myself for a period of weeks, and finally, I got called into the couple who were kind of the supervisors of our dorm floor and floors, I should say, and who themselves, I think, were grad students. Probably the ancient age of their late 20s or something. Um, but anyway, and so with some trepidation, I went into their office or their apartment, because they kind of had a flat there in the dorm, and was like, oh no, what have I done? And all they wanted to know was, why was I sitting apart? And I just, is there some trouble? Was there some problem? Was there some, you know, personal difficulty or, you know, feud going on or something like that? I said, oh, nothing like that. I just, I'm getting into yoga and I just want to be alone. I just want to be quiet. I don't want to get into all this boisterous commotion. And when I first tripped over that line that I just read a few minutes ago, seclusion is the price of greatness, I didn't know what the heck it meant. I thought, gosh, then to be great is to be alone, is to be misunderstood, is to be, always by yourself in life. And it doesn't mean anything like that. What it means is, if you're going to achieve your highest potential, you have to rely on what's inside. And you can't spend all your time with other people, or it's like you're just sort of dissipating that energy. And it's an important point, because in the astrological world, seclusion would be represented most by the planet Saturn. This is according to Dharmadas, the astrologer, which I'm not. So you can take this with as many grains of salt as you want. But my understanding is that people who have strong Saturn in their charts are going through a Saturn period, or some kind of strong Saturn what's influence is one word, but aspect, where one planet is aspecting Saturn, or Saturn is aspecting another planet, will often have more alone time during that period. And for many people, that's just a complete freak out. That's just like, oh my God. I mean, I remember being in India and we would talk about this word, seclusion, and it was like people's eyes would bulge. And it was just, it's very scary, the thought of being alone with God, alone with Guru. I mean, we're never alone, really, but we can feel alone. And as perhaps some of you have experienced, it is entirely possible to feel terribly lonely in a crowd and quite content by oneself. So, it's not like God is imposing this seclusion and saying, you go to your room or something. He's just saying, dive into the joy inside, dive into the potential inside. And that's how you become great. That's how you achieve your own true greatness and potential. But I appreciate that, because though we do need companionship, though we do need to relate to others and to learn to relate to others sensitively and meaningfully, it's not enough um, to sort of rely on that all the time. Being with others will not advance you on the path, except, and I'll go to another reading here in a few minutes, except when it's sort of required. Because as you'll hear, Swami Kriyananda, himself wanted to be a hermit. He wanted to just completely withdraw, and he would have been quite happy to be in the background. And Yogananda kept pushing him to the foreground. So he had a job to do specifically, and that job was to serve the work, but that job was also to sort of untangle his own karma from other lifetimes, as he explained, and as we'll talk about later on. So anyway, was an interesting little sidelight to Yogananda's wanting to build a cooperative spirit, but at the same time, he wanted it to be based on, rooted in deep, deep inner awareness of each individual and the willingness and actual experience to spend serious time alone. Swami Kriyananda recommended for those of us seriously on the path that we try to spend a week in a year in seclusion and just time dedicated to God. And, that may be more naturally the sort of the sense of the fall and winter periods, when the energy sort of goes more inward. It's a little more natural to want to do that, but it's perfectly fine to do it at any time of the year when the schedule works out. But it's just a beautiful time to be alone with God, and it's an important thing to try to practice even daily. And as I said, we have experienced 15 months of an extended period of this, so maybe it's time for a little balancing act there. But to take advantage of it to the degree that you can, it's really, really helpful and important. Okay, so we'll have another chant, and then I'll do another reading, and then maybe Nirmala will speak after that. Okay, so let's sing Om Guru and Om Kali. Kali being the Divine Mother.
So I'll just say a few words and tell a little story about Swami. And from the beautiful story that Dharmadas was reading from the path, it reminded me of when I was first at Ananda and very youthful, energetic kind of person, but basically very quiet and reserved. So I felt the inspiration being around Swami, as most people did. I felt that energy and I wanted to be around it. I knew that being close to that magnetism would help me on a soul level. And I don't know how conscious I was of that, but I felt it very strongly and I did everything I could to be at everything that he did, no matter how inconvenient or how difficult it was to get there. I would put out the energy to be there. And one time I was very sick, and it wasn't a contagious kind of sick. It was just not feeling well myself in my own body, nothing to do with anyone else. And I forced myself to walk over to his house. And as soon as I walked in the door, in those days, his whole house was just the dome at Crystal Hermitage, where now you walk into a foyer and then you walk into this beautiful blue carpeted living room dome with the grand piano on one side and all of that. Well, where the grand piano was the kitchen, and down a staircase, a narrow staircase, was the satsang room. And right next to the kitchen was the door where you entered. There was a very small mud room there. But as soon as you walked in the door, you looked right out those big windows. They weren't quite that big in those days. And Swami was seated, usually right under those windows. Well, I got myself over there to his house. I walked in the door, and he took one look at me. And this was before I worked for him or knew him all that well, but he took one look at me and he called out over this room full of milling people, "Nirmala, you're not well." And I think he said then, "Why did you come?" Or, uh, "You should go home. You're really just not well." It was a very caring statement. It wasn't like, "Get out." But I said, "I really wanted to see you." And he said, "Okay, you've seen me. Now please go home." And I turned right around. I pranamed and turned right around and went home and went to bed. But he was always very sensitive and aware. There must have been 50 people in that room. No one even noticed me, but he did. And he saw what was going on and he related to it. So naturally, I wanted to be around that. It seems like most people would have wanted to be around that, but it was amazing how many people shied away from it. It was interesting to me many years later. He decided to do a series of evening concerts during the summer, and he would sing Indian bhajans or other devotional songs, and he would often have me play the tambura and play the bells, sometimes chanting on the harmonium. He would have Lewis come and play the tabla. Those evenings were absolutely blissful. And he wanted to make it a big thing. And so he would have those of us who worked for him really promote it and really let everyone in the community know about it. There weren't that many people from outside the community in those days who would travel up. But I suppose some people came from Sacramento, which was the only center there was in those days. That was our big outreach. And so I remember putting together flyers about it and uh, posting them around, putting things in people's mailboxes and all that sort of promotion. And yet we still got people saying, "Oh, well, I can't drive that far, or it's it's too late at night. It was starting at 7. You know, I didn't want to walk over the hill to do that. It just was amazing to me how many people didn't take the opportunity to be with him when they could. Years later, I think it was in the late 90s, after Swami had moved officially to Italy and built a house there and stayed there a lot of the time, he invited people to come over. And so often people would say, "Oh, I can't afford that kind of trip." And I remember one time he asked Dharmadas and I if we would come over, and we had no money, but we instantly said, "Yes, yes, we'll come." And in those days, I was doing the finances at home, and I never did figure out quite how we paid for that trip. It's like the money just manifested in our checkbook. It was quite amazing. But the point is that when you feel that inspiration, you have to go with it. And that is something that I very much learned being around Swami, being his assistant for those years that I did that, to say yes. He even composed a beautiful album called Say Yes to Life. And it was one of his mottos to respond positively, say yes to whatever is being asked, to whatever is coming to you. And the reason that Dharmadas's story from the path brought all this up for me is that I really spent many years with Swami as the focal point of my life. And I really don't regret a second of that, because it was basically trying to be in tune with him. And I didn't always make it. There were a lot of times that I made mistakes and I chose incorrectly and so on. But that whole process of those years was trying to be in tune with that vibration. And that's what we all need to do. We need to follow that inspiration, live for it, focus on it, and make it the center of our lives. And that's what we do through Swami to Master. So Swami has more than 150 books that he's written, thousands of lectures on audio. I don't know how many thousands of videos. He's created for all of us a tremendous resource that we can tune into. He hasn't left us at all. If we tune into him, he's right there for us. And if we are in tune with him, we can get in tune with Master all the more easily, because he loved Master with every atom of his being. And he was more Master than he was Kriyananda by the end of his life. He was so in tune with Master, always asking, always tuning in. And so allow other people in your life, of course, and honor them and respect them as channels of God, God speaking to you also through everyone else in your life. But keep that focus of serving the other people in your life as though they were master, giving to them, serving them, and loving them with God's love. And then you're never alone because God is with you very, very dynamically in your life. And now I will change the camera and Dharmadas will read another excerpt.
So this is from the chapter, again, from the New Path, the chapter called True Teaching is Individual. And Swami is talking about an experience that he had. He used to put the announcements in newspapers telling when Yogananda was going to be giving the Sunday service at a particular center. In this case, it was San Diego, the church that they had in San Diego. And Master hadn't been there for 2 months. So when Swami put the announcement saying he was coming, he knew the church would be very full. And then this is what happened. One week in May, I was instructed to send in the announcement that Master would appear there the following Sunday. It had been at least 2 months since his last appearance there. I smiled to think how delighted the congregation members would be. Saturday morning, Bernard came to my room with horrifying news. Master can't go to San Diego after all. He wants you to speak in his stead. Me? But I've never lectured before in my life. He also wants you, Bernard continued with appalling insouciance, to give a Kriya Yoga initiation afterwards. What? But my goodness, I've only attended one initiation. 2, Bernard corrected me. Master also initiated you last October at 29 Palms, remember? All right, 2. What difference does that make? I mean, well, of course I'll obey, but those poor people. So then he gets reviewed on how to do a Kriya initiation, and he goes to San Diego. In a little room behind the church, I prayed desperately for help and guidance. As the time arrived for the service to begin, I went out and sat in the chair at the center of the stage, as was the custom in those days. Through the closed curtains, I could clearly hear the murmur of a large and eagerly waiting crowd. The dreaded moment arrived. I stood up. The curtains parted. My worst fears were realized. The church was completely packed. People were standing in the aisles. Others were craning their heads in through the windows. I could feel the wave of shock as something almost physical. Instead of their long-awaited guru, here before them was an unknown and rather lost-looking boy of 22, asking them if they were still awake and ready. I felt so sorry for them in their disappointment that I overlooked the awkwardness of my own position. If everyone there had walked out, I would have understood, but regular meditation evidently had made them gracious. No one left. The Kriya initiation that afternoon frightened me even more than the service. The lady I initiated looked as terrified as I was, infected, as she later admitted to me, by my own insecurity. Master's blessings, however, powerfully present, soon dispelled all my anxiety. The ceremony went smoothly. I returned to Mount Washington that afternoon, bowed perhaps, but unbloodied. Later, Master received compliments on my lecture. Most of all, he reported, pleased, they liked your humility. Humility, I reflected, under the circumstances, had been virtually unavoidable. In case anyone wonders, this next paragraph was not in the original path, and I think he added it later. an interesting one. In case anyone wonders at Master's willingness to disappoint so many people, I can only point out that if his reason for doing so had been some special need of his own, there were other experienced teacher disciples whom he could have called upon. Since he chose me, he can only have had in mind some reason concerning myself. Over the succeeding months, he made it increasingly clear to me that he was counting on me to spread his mission far afield, his message far afield. My youth and inexperience were not, for him, the issue that they were quite naturally for me. He saw us, as he often indicated, in terms of the past lives we had spent with him, not only the present life. And it's just interesting to me to reflect on Swami's response in that situation. So he's put the announcement in, Master's supposed to appear in San Diego, and then the day before, which of course now they can't change the announcement, Master asks him to go. And the natural human reaction is, ay, 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 ay. But then he says, well, of course I'll go. Of course I'll obey. But oh my God, those people. And immediately he's thinking of their need. He's thinking of their reality. And I don't know how unusual that is in your life, but wow, that's not a common response in this world, especially around public speaking. Most people would rather die than speak publicly. I mean, literally, that's, statistically true in surveys. And, whether how much it applied to Swami or not, I don't know. Later in this, Swami is telling Master that he doesn't really want to be a minister. And Master replied very pleasantly, well, you'd better learn to like it because that's what you'll have to do. And so obviously he had that in mind, that Swami needed to do that, to take that role in that position. But it's just fascinating to realize that what we need is by no means what we want. And sometimes it seems to run exactly counter to what we want or what we would prefer in life. And the Master says, deal with it. It's what you have to do. And we have to sort of trust in that process of realizing that, even this is, if this is uncomfortable, if it's helpful, if it's dissolving of my ego. Now, this is not small stuff. This is not kindergarten spirituality. This is kind of advanced stuff because only spiritual warriors are ready to have their ego demolished. It's not a lot of fun to have your ego demolished, but it's really, really important when it's time to release it and go into the infinite. And Swami really, really wanted that. And so Master said, okay, well, then I'm going to take you seriously and I'm going to ask you to do things that are uncomfortable, such as giving a Kriya initiation at the age of 22 to somebody, that you haven't ever met. And, you've only been to 2 initiations yourself, and et cetera, et cetera. All of us at one time or another in life get asked to do things that we've never done, or that we don't think we're good at, or that we just plain don't want to do. And it's really, really helpful in those cases to broaden our perspective and just try to see it from a bigger vantage point. And I just really appreciate how Swami was able to do that. And, we see it in this reading. I mean, we saw it throughout his life. He would inevitably take the high road when some challenge or some difficulty was there. And if he had made a promise, he would keep that promise. I mean, unless death was staring him in the face. But I mean, he would not break engagements that he had committed to. He just wouldn't. And so anyway, it's a helpful perspective for our own lives. So I have one other reading And I think this one is a fairly, well, I don't know that it's a short one, but I'm just going to read a little bit about um, Master spoke in Beverly Hills at a garden party in late July of 1949. And I'm not going to read that part because I think many of us have heard that, heard of and heard about that speech and heard it quoted. But what Swami writes afterwards is really interesting. Often during the years I was with Master, he exhorted his audiences to fulfill his cherished dream to found world brotherhood colonies or spiritual cooperative communities, not monasteries merely, but but places where people in every walk of life could devote themselves to living for God. Environment is stronger than willpower, he often told us. He saw world brotherhood colonies as environments for fostering right spiritual attitudes such as humility, trust, devotion, respect for others, and friendly cooperation. For people with worldly responsibilities who want a better way of life, small cooperative communities offer the best hope of fulfilling that desire and also of demonstrating to society at large that people can, indeed, achieve heights so scornfully repudiated in this age of spiritual underachievers. Such communities, Master said, would emphasize cooperative attitudes rather than egoic social and political rights and present day norms of cutthroat competition. Take the best advice I can give you, he said. Gather together those of you who share high ideals. Pool your resources. Buy land out in the country. A simple life will bring you inner freedom. Harmony with nature will bring you a happiness known to few city dwellers. In the company of other truth seekers, you will find it easier to meditate and think of God. What is the need for all the luxuries with which people surround themselves? Most of what they have, they are paying for on the installment plan. Their debts are a source of unending worry to them. Even people whose luxuries have been paid off are not free. Attachment makes them slaves. They consider themselves freer for their possessions and don't see how, in turn, their possessions now possess them. The day will come when this colony ideal will spread through the world like wildfire. And this is the photo of Yogananda holding up his hands in blessing on that occasion in Beverly Hills when he sowed his thoughts in the ether around the topic of world brotherhood colonies. And I won't say a lot more about this except that we have been looking for land in the country. Um, Not that we don't have land here in the city as well, but we don't really have farmland as such, and um, a little bit of nature nearby. But we're more or less in a city here, and we're trying to have the chance to be able to get away from the city occasionally. And think of this, wherever you may be, as a call to simplify. That's really the main thing. How can we simplify our lives in such a way that we can really focus on the deepest spiritual ideals that we have inside? That's the call that Master is giving. Whether or not you can join a World Brotherhood colony, that may depend on circumstances that are not easily changed or adjustable or amenable to that. That's fine. But all of us can find ways to simplify. That part is entirely under our control or mostly under our control. So think of simplicity as a high ideal. Yogananda advocated plain living and high thinking. And unfortunately, we've gotten a little too accustomed in the West to high living and plain thinking, and that's kind of back to front. So we want to get it going the right way around. But I'll just conclude by reminding us of that simple line that Yogananda often iterated, and we have often reiterated: environment is stronger than willpower. And environment includes the websites that you visit, the apps that you spend time on, you know, the home environment that you're in, the work environment that you go to. I mean, all of the pathways that we choose in life influence us. And so it's well to just be aware of that, because we get, I used to build homes for a living, and I remember reading, I think it was Winston Churchill said this, but whoever said it, there's a truth in it. We build our homes, and then our homes, we think we're doing this amazing thing building our homes, but then our homes build us afterwards for a long, long time. And so we want that environment to be very uplifting. It's really, really important. And so whatever you can do to achieve that in your life, it really, really helps. So we'll have another chant or two now, and let's do pole star. Yeah. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star.
I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, my sea is dark and my stars are gone, Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made evil start my life. I have made evil start my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are not. Sea is dark and my stars are not. Still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made evil start my life. I have made evil start my life. Oh, my sea is dark and my stars are not. Sea is dark and my stars are not. Still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made evil start of my life. I have made evil start of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are not. Still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made evil start of my life. I have made evil start of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are dark. Stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made evil start of my life. I have made evil start of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone. Sea is dark and my stars are not. Still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. Start my life. I have made start. Let's take a moment now to visualize this world and everyone who is in need of healing energy, remembering especially our planet, this environment that we call home, and all the healing that needs to take place there through the hearts of people everywhere. Let's remember all of those who are suffering from COVID. Let's see each one surrounded in God's loving, healing light. Let's rub our hands together, feeling the energy there. And then raising our hands, let's chant Om, being a channel for God's healing light and blessing throughout this universe and into the hearts of His creatures everywhere.
Om. Peace. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us.
God bless you all.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.